On March 18, 2026, the Israeli Air Force conducted a series of high-altitude, precision airstrikes targeting the South Pars gas field and the onshore processing hub at Asaluye in Iran's Bushehr province. This operation, which took place at approximately 2:10 p.m. local time, targeted critical upstream gas pipelines and treatment facilities that underpin roughly 70% of Iran's domestic gas supply. Reports from the region indicate that at least 2 major refineries were taken offline to contain resulting fires, causing an immediate 14% drop in Iran's total gas production and forcing a complete halt of gas exports to neighboring Iraq. This military action followed a 48-hour window in which Israel and the United States confirmed the deaths of 3 high-ranking Iranian officials: Security Chief Ali Larijani, Intelligence Minister Esmail Khatib, and Basij Commander Gholamreza Soleimani. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz stated that the military is now focused on hitting Iran's wallet, signaling a shift from a war of tactical assassinations to a total war of economic attrition. The strike on South Pars has created a unique diplomatic and environmental crisis because the field is a shared geological reservoir known as the North Field in Qatar. Within hours of the Israeli operation, the Qatari Foreign Ministry issued a statement branding the attack as dangerous and irresponsible, noting that damage to the shared field directly threatens the national security and economic interests of neutral third parties. The environmental impact is also significant, as burning petrochemical installations have released clouds of toxic compounds that are drifting across the Persian Gulf toward the coastlines of the United Arab Emirates and Oman. In direct response to the Israeli strikes, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a regional evacuation order for energy infrastructure, designating foreign oil and gas sites as legitimate targets for retaliation. By Wednesday evening, Qatar Energy confirmed that the Ras Laffan industrial complex, the world's largest liquefied natural gas hub, had been struck by Iranian missiles, resulting in extensive damage to processing facilities and a suspension of LNG exports to global markets. In the wake of the Iranian retaliatory strikes on Qatar and reported drone attacks on refineries in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, Donald Trump issued a statement via Truth Social that has established a new red line for U.S. intervention. Trump claimed that the United States had no prior knowledge of the specific Israeli plan to hit the South Pars field, but he condemned Iran's response against innocent infrastructure in Qatar. He warned Tehran that if any further attacks are made against Qatari LNG facilities or allied energy assets, the United States will massively blow up the entirety of Iran's South Pars gas field. Trump's message emphasized that while he is reluctant to authorize such a level of destruction due to the long-term implications for the future of Iran, he will not hesitate to use strength and power that has never been seen or witnessed before to protect global energy transit. This ultimatum has placed the Pentagon on high alert, with carrier strike groups in the region reportedly moving into strike positions to intercept further Iranian missile activity. This cycle of energy for energy escalation has caused a dramatic shift in the diplomatic landscape of the Arab world. An emergency meeting of foreign ministers in Riyadh resulted in a joint statement from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, and Pakistan, which condemned the Iranian strikes on civilian and energy infrastructure as a flagrant violation of state sovereignty. This coalition has affirmed its right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter, and called upon the UN Security Council to take immediate measures to deter further violations. Analysts suggest that Iran's strategy of targeting regional hubs to pressure the West may have backfired, as it has instead unified its neighbors in a defensive alignment against Tehran's military actions. The diplomatic fallout is already visible, with Qatar ordering Iranian military and security attachés to leave the country within 24 hours, marking a breakdown in a relationship that had previously served as a vital channel for regional mediation. The global economic impact of the destruction at South Pars and Ras Laffan is manifesting in a historic surge in energy prices and market volatility. International oil prices, which had already been elevated due to the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, jumped from $103 to over $113 per barrel in the aftermath of the strikes. Natural gas prices in Europe and Asia have skyrocketed, with European benchmark prices jumping as much as 30% in a single day. Global energy firms have begun declaring force majeure on contracts as production remains halted, and the U.S. Treasury Department is reportedly considering an emergency release of strategic reserves to stabilize the market. In several major economies, the cost of transportation and manufacturing is rising so rapidly that it threatens to cause a widespread supply shock, affecting everything from basic grocery staples to industrial chemical production. On March 20th, 26, the strategic architecture of the Persian Gulf underwent a second, even more profound transformation as the energy war entered a phase of total digital and physical convergence. While the fires at the South Pars and Ras Laffan facilities continue to rage, a new and perhaps more lethal front has opened in the electromagnetic spectrum. Reports from the Pentagon and regional security firms like CloudSec indicate that the Gulf's remaining refineries are now under a persistent, high-intensity cyber assault, designed to bypass traditional physical defenses. These are not merely digital nuisance attacks. They are sophisticated AI-driven operations that target the industrial control systems, ICS, of desalination plants and oil stabilization units across Saudi Arabia and the UAE. By attempting to override the safety protocols of these massive machines, anonymous actors, widely believed to be linked to the IRGC's specialized cyber units, are trying to cause internal meltdowns that would take years, not months, to repair. This digital onslaught is being synchronized with the deployment of advanced electronic warfare drone swarms. These are no longer the simple kamikaze drones seen in earlier conflicts. The latest intelligence reveals that these swarms are carrying sophisticated jamming equipment designed to blind the high-tech Aegis and Patriot missile defense systems that protect the region's vital hubs. By creating massive dead zones in radar coverage, these swarms allow conventional missiles to slip through the net. In response, the UAE and Saudi Arabia have moved to a state of active cyber denial, deploying their own autonomous interceptors that use machine learning to identify and neutralize these digital and physical threats in milliseconds. The result is a silent, invisible war occurring in the skies and the server rooms of the Middle East, where the winner is decided not by the size of their bombs, but by the speed of their code. While the digital war escalates, the physical reality on the ground has become a logistical nightmare for the global economy. The Hormuz factor has now reached its most critical point, with the strait effectively transformed into a no-go zone for commercial shipping. Major maritime carriers like Maersk have officially suspended the return of empty containers to ports in the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait, citing the extreme risk to crews and vessels. This has created a logistical dam, where goods are piling up in ports across Asia and Europe, unable to reach their destinations. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, has issued an extraordinary call for a safe passage framework to evacuate over 100 merchant ships currently trapped inside the Gulf. But with GPS signals suffering from extensive jamming and the waters littered with smart mines, the prospects for a peaceful evacuation remain grim. The fallout of this blockade is hitting the Western defense industrial base with a pre-logistical crisis that was never fully modeled by military planners. Beyond the obvious spike in oil prices, the world is now facing a sulfur shock, because sulfur is a vital byproduct of Middle Eastern oil refining and a critical input for the extraction of copper and cobalt. The current energy disruption is beginning to strangle the production of high-tech munitions and radar equipment in the United States and Europe. Analysts from West Point's Modern War Institute warned that it would take over 30,000 kilograms of copper just to replace the major U.S. radars recently damaged in Bahrain and Qatar, copper that cannot be easily sourced as the global supply chain disintegrates. This is a cascading issue where the energy war in the Gulf is directly eroding the military readiness of the very nations trying to contain the conflict. As the economic and military pressure mounts, the internal stability of the Iranian regime is facing its most severe test since the 1979 revolution. Following the assassinations of Larijani and Khatib, the Islamic Republic has moved into a paranoia doctrine. Reports from inside Tehran suggest that rank-and-file security forces, terrified of becoming the next targets of Israeli decapitation strikes, are no longer sleeping in official barracks, choosing instead to hide in mosques and public sports facilities. This internal collapse of morale is being met with a brutal crackdown on the domestic population. During the Persian New Year, the traditional fire festivals became scenes of state-sponsored violence as the regime, sensing a civilian uprising, used live ammunition to maintain control. The war of the ghosts is now a war against its own people, as the Iranian leadership chooses to burn its sovereign future rather than concede a single inch to the international coalition gathering on its borders. While the digital and logistical war grinds the global economy toward a halt, the diplomatic landscape has shifted into a realm of strategic deterrence that few predicted. Reports have emerged from Riyadh and Islamabad regarding a strategic mutual defense agreement, a pact signed in late 2025 that is now being activated in real time. This agreement, which uses language similar to NATO's Article 5, states that any aggression against either country shall be considered an aggression against both. As Iranian ballistic missiles reach the doorstep of the Saudi capital, geopolitical analysts are pointing to a chilling new reality: the activation of a de facto nuclear umbrella provided by Pakistan over the Saudi kingdom. While the official text of the pact remains classified, Saudi researchers have publicly indicated that all military means are on the table, effectively placing Pakistan's nuclear arsenal into the Middle East security equation as a counterbalance to the Iranian martyrdom doctrine. This shift toward a nuclear shadow has been accelerated by a wave of force majeure declarations that have officially severed the global energy supply chain. Major energy giants, including Qatar Energy, Shell, and Total Energies, have formally notified their international clients that they can no longer fulfill their contractual obligations due to events beyond their control. The shutdown of the Laffan and Maritime facilities has removed roughly 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas from the market overnight. In response, Kuwait Petroleum Corporation and Bahrain's Bapco have followed suit, citing the near-total collapse of shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. These declarations are the legal equivalent of an economic heart attack. They release producers from penalties while leaving importing nations in Europe and Asia to scavenge for dwindling reserves on a spot market, where prices are no longer governed by logic, but by survival. For Europe, the Qatari gas halt has triggered a crisis that eclipses the energy shock of 2022. Benchmark gas prices at the Dutch TTF have surged by nearly 50% in a matter of days, as the realization sinks in that 14% of the EU's LNG imports have simply vanished. While nations like Spain remain relatively insulated due to their diversified renewable grids, gas-heavy economies like Italy and Germany are seeing electricity costs rise by over 50%. The EU's fossil fuel import bill has skyrocketed by an additional €6 billion in just 3 weeks, forcing emergency summits where leaders are debating the return of price caps and industrial subsidies. This is the second energy de-risking of the decade, as the continent finds that its move away from Russian pipelines has only traded one geopolitical vulnerability for another, even more volatile one in the Persian Gulf. In Asia, the situation is even more dire. Pakistan, despite its role as a security provider for the Saudis, it's facing a domestic energy blackout of historic proportions. Schools have been shut and offices emptied as the country struggles to cope with the loss of its own LNG imports, which are now trapped behind the Iranian blockade. The Hormuz factor has turned from a strategic leverage point for Tehran into a regional noose that is strangling the manufacturing hubs of India and China. As the world's factories begin to go dark, the supply chain domino is starting to fall, with Indian industries already declaring their own force majeure on exports of chemicals and pharmaceuticals. The war of the ghosts has now evolved into a war of total attrition, where the front lines are found in the bank accounts of European citizens, the dark streets of Islamabad, and the high-security bunkers of the Iranian leadership. As the international community watches the nuclear umbrella unfold over Riyadh, the question is no longer if the global order will change, but what will be left of it when the final blow eventually lands.